Miles Leach, Tyndale University College, Toronto, Canada. Thank you for your talk. I really enjoyed hearing about this, although it's a sad story, your honest take on this bit of history with this man. You'll excuse me, I won't talk about some of the ideas, but I was very interested in this question of the translation for some Greek word that presumably meant demon by the word ancestor. I've worked in Bantu Africa for many years. What would have been a better translation of the biblical notion of evil spirit or whatever? I can certainly see how ancestors would not be a very good way of doing it. But I wondered what other concept would have worked much better. Thank you.
Well, first I have to say the ancestors represent the divine community of the departed. So if we take it that demons represent evil, there is no, I mean, it is hard to argue that one could have thought this is the closest translation of the word demons. So, of course, we don't have the concept of demons, but they could have used the explanation evil spirits, as you say, moe e maswe. Yeah. So, taking that which is supposed to be sacred and making it the most evil thing has to be placed somewhere than to say it was a search for whatever form to form or equivalent. It has to be placed somewhere else. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm Daud Susilo from United Bible Societies. Thank you very much, Professor Musa. Actually, I cried with you. You know, I cried with you. But let me ask you, there are two things. Because, you know, having been involved with the work, I understand that there are different scenarios whether this, you know, this Robert Moffat actually worked with mother tongue speakers, whether the, you know, this can be the so-called, you know, forgive me for my old terms, informants, maybe saying the right thing or maybe not the right thing or did not get the right, you know, not responding, understanding the question right, so therefore giving the wrong answer, or misunderstanding the question, you know. So there are different scenarios. So, you know, we're just wondering if there is a way to reconstruct that would be great. But more positively though, has there been now an effort by mother tongue speakers of just doing a new translation, you know, because that will be the right way, you know. Okay, thanks.
Yes. If by 1908 the version, this is the second version, was published, if the informants had told them the wrong thing, by 1908, which is almost 58 years later, the missionaries themselves would have known that this is not the word to use. I read somewhere that here, I'm still looking for the place where he describes who were his helpers. What I found is him saying, you know, these ignorant interpreters and all that is better not to use them. So I need to find more information about who were his informants. But yes, talking about the revision, we have only had a revision in 1993. That is done by Setswana, what we call the Morolong, you know, Bible. In that Bible, they have changed, you know, Badimu to Moae Maswe. They have replaced ancestors with evil spirits. Yeah. And what was very interesting is that when I read the preface of the Setswana Bible, the new one, they said, we have not changed anything in this Bible. All we were dealing with in this Bible, we did this Bible entirely for issues of orthography, because the orthography has changed now. We wanted to, but when I actually looked at the content, I saw that they did change that, yes. Then, the interesting thing about this, like when I went to do my research, of course, I went and bought the latest Setswana versions. There's one that they did was New Testament, but didn't get to the Old Testament, I think 1970. I went and bought those that used the latest orthography to read this passage. I was doing something entirely different. So when I was reading the passage with the latest translation, with Botswana, which I thought they would like, the people said, oh, what version are you reading? Wait, let me go and get my Bible. So they will go into their house and pick their own Bible. Which Bible did they bring out? 1908 Wiki Bible. And that is the Bible where it still uses ancestors as demons. And I think this is recorded by a number of other people, that people remain very much attached to the oldest translations, even if they are not the best. So yes, we have the 1993, Morolong complete version that was made by the local people, but people still read the 1908 Wiki Bible, of which still keeps that, version. In fact, if you go into some churches, the people who are Botswana, when they preach, they use more like Sotho, which is more related. So it's like that language in itself has become encoded, the first language encoded as like holy language to the people. As to how long it will take before they transcend to this newer version by Botswana is another question. I don't know how long that will take.
We'll take two more questions, Wanawala and Edwin.
Thank you very much for that moving account. I was wondering, Bible translation happened in the context of conversions. And conversion in itself was a kind of a displacement of people from one kind of habitus into another. And therefore, are you seeing this violence, which you have illustrated at a lexical level, in terms of the ancestors being translated as demons, or would you like to locate your study in this kind of a more material condition, which was in a way a manipulation of an economic crisis, right? One of the reasons for conversion in the Indian context was the poorer people got converted because they could find a better economic position. So would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I think actually this issue of conversion and evangelization and the link between translation is a very interesting one. Because on the one hand, the religious documents and their translators insist they want to maintain and to keep and to preserve the text. But on the other hand, the whole thing of evangelizing other people is really about advertising your own religion. Just as the people who are selling a document or a product in New York may want to sell it in India. And when they do that, they know that the strategy of speaking to people in New York is not the same as when you speak to the people in India. But you still want the Indians to buy the product. So your cornflakes becomes basmati rice or something like that. So on the other hand, there is a real claim that as we, as the biblical translators, We want to keep the word as it was, original, form to form or whatever. But it's true that because the desire to translate to translate to other cultures, especially in the modern imperial times, was to sell the gospel, to advertise it to people who did not buy it. So what do you do now to tell the people they need this thing? Means that you had to change. I remember Robert Carroll, a scholar from Britain, has an article where he discusses biblical translation in Latin America to one group that once again had this sense of being a sinner and being guilty, that you needed to be saved. It's not a concept that all people had. So he faced the same thing as Robert Moffat. The people were telling him, there's not one sinner here. So who is this Jesus who died for us? We don't have the sin. So this man, I forget the precise, but this is in the Semea issue that was done on translation, who was a missionary somewhere in Latin America, had, when he did his translation, actually put down, in the crucifixion, the trial, had the name of that ethnic group as the one that crucified and killed Jesus. Why? Because he needed to create the guilt. So for that particular ethnic group to own up, to say, yes, we have sins, yes, we have to repent. So I think there is a fine line between understanding our religious documents as something we must conserve and keep and claim that. But when we look at the actual texts that have been translated, and the agenda to sell the products, to sell the religion to other people, we realize that that agenda did entail changing the text in order for a particular ethnic to buy it. So let me come to the second question that you said. In some areas, it was the poor people who ended up being Christians because, the coming in of the missionaries allowed them to renegotiate their power issues in their particular, ethnic groups. Like in India, the low caste, the so-called untouchables, being already oppressed and excluded by their own, nation, the coming in of the missionaries allowed them to renegotiate their status. Whereas, in the Indian belief, they were even outside the body of God. They were untouchable, the outcasts. In the Christian belief, they could also become God's made, and made in God's image. So, to renegotiate their position, they embraced the Christian belief in order to deal with the oppressive cultural belief on the ground. With the Botswana, we don't have this as the main issue for conversion. But what was happening in Southern Africa at that time was that there was a lot of coming in of different colonial powers, the Dutch, the English people, and then the Germans in West Africa. When we look at the trend of when did Botswana get, converted, if you read the Jean and John Komarov of Revelation and Revolution, they have made it their profession just to study the missionary, documents, especially the Tswana speaking. They've written 3 huge documents, They look at the plot of when do the Botswana become converted, and it is when it has become absolutely clear to the Botswana that they have no choice about being colonized now. Maybe the only choice they have is who is going to colonize us. And it just so happened that the Dutch people, now known as the Boer, were known as the Boer in our culture of apartheid, were more harsh in their dealings with the native people and the English people have their own way of dealing with you in such a way that you feel that even if they tell you to go to hell, but it's nice. So you know, so naturally, the Botswana felt that if they have to choose, they have to choose the English in order to become colonized. It was really no choice. The Germans were pushing from West Africa this way, and the Dutch were having their own conflicts with the white people. They were pushing into the interior, and the way they were having their relationships with the native people was very, very raw. And I think the native, if you read history, it shows that the native people were now aware that it's no longer a choice that you'll be ruled by a white person. The only choice that we can have is, you know, who will rule you. And it so happened that the missionaries that were working amongst the Botswana were British. You know, John Mackenzie, Robert Moffat, and the rest. You know, if you read, John Mackenzie was very, very pro, you know, the colonization of Botswana, making all the strategies that the land should be given to the Queen, all the people must run there. You know, I mean, that missionary even at some point crossed the point and became, you know, part of the, you know, the colonial, you know. So their letters, they were very pro. I mean, Livingstone and all those, they were very, very pro their country. So the missionaries were representing the interests of the, you know, the colonizer, their own mother countries. As I said, Robert Moffat's book of 1842 is addressed, in the preface, is addressed to the Queen. Yeah. So I'm not saying that we don't have examples of where they may have preached and it was the poorest who first became Christians. But that was not the major issue. The major issue became colonialism in that context of different colonial competitors and the natives feeling that they have no choice, and in a way to fight the Boers, you know, they had to align themselves with the British. So in fact, one of the missionaries organizes 3 chiefs to go to Britain to beg to be colonized. Yeah, and you know, but they only get colonized when we look at the real reason was because Cecil John Rose wanted to have the route from Cape to Cairo. So they accept that request because the British wants to make sure they keep the road, Cecil John Rose, Cape to Cairo, against the intruding Germans in West Africa and the Dutch people. There's a lot of conflict, you know, going on. Yeah.
Edwin? Excellent. Well, clearly we are just at the beginning, and Professor Dube, thank you again for a wonderful beginning. Let's thank you.